Good evening, Officer Dawn. I just wanted to say thank you again for sitting down with me and doing this interview.
You're more than welcome.
For everybody that's listening, can you describe your job position?
I am the Administrator of Victim Services for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department.
And what is it that you do?
I make the initial contact and I also oversee all of the communication between our agency and victims of juvenile crime.
And is that in the entire state of Texas?
That's in the entire state of Texas. Yes, ma'am.
So, in my research for this project I'm doing, I am researching victim blaming. So, can you define victim blaming in your line of work?
Victim blaming, the way that it applies for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, has to do with either the respondent or the offender, or perhaps the offender's family, placing blame on the victim for the offense having occurred. That is something that is much more common than most people would think, actually.
You say it's common. So, what is the percentage of those who fall victim to being blamed for the offense that happened to them?
The most common victim blaming scenarios that we see are related to sexual offenses or assaultive offenses. And surprisingly enough, a lot of those offenses are family offenses. In other words, they are assaultive offenses that take place one family member against another. Um, Continuous assault and family violence is a very common one that has victim blaming attached to it.
Mhm. So, what kind of influence do you normally see with victim blaming? Like, how does it affect the case or the victim or the offender?
Well, you have to remember that the victim notification and the victim interaction that I have is post adjudication. In other words, the respondents or the offenders are already in a secure facility or in a contract facility that's run by the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. So the initial court hearings and everything have already taken place. But what we run into, and what is not uncommon at all, is when there are return to court dates. In other words, if an offender has a determinate sentence and they have to go back to court prior to them turning 19 years old, during the course of that court hearing, it's not uncommon at all for the victim to be blamed for the offense having occurred. It's also not uncommon for the victim being blamed by the offender when they're in therapy, whether that's sexual offender therapy or if it is just assaultive type therapy. But it's not uncommon at all for the offender to try to place blame on the victim.
So, would you say that for the offender, the rate of recidivism is higher than other cases?
Do you mean, is it higher for instances in which we see victim blaming being a part of the adjustment?
Yes, sir.
Not necessarily, no. What happens is a lot of times is that the victim blaming is that's one of the first things that happens when an individual starts therapy. As they progress through therapy, it's explained to them what their actual responsibility was in the offense and them having committed the offense. For instance, they're taught that one of the things that caused them to commit that offense, or that empowered them to commit that offense, is improper thinking. And that improper thinking is also something that's taken place when the victim blaming is happening.
Okay. So, what kinds of resources are available to victims who have been blamed for their situation?
There are numerous different types of resources, actually. In cases where where it's a family, where there's an entire family involved. For instance, a youth has assaulted a mother, a brother, a father, a sister, something like that within their family. Then family reintegration therapy is actually something that's offered by TJJD before the youth is released from our purview. There will be family reintegration therapy that takes place, and that will involve the entire family, everyone that's going to be living in the household. There are also various types of community resources available, from individual therapy to, again, family and group type therapy. And those resources are found in different places in different counties. There's no one consistent model throughout the state of Texas, but we have information that we can provide on the resources in the different counties. And the Attorney General also has a very good list of resources on their website.
And are there any resources offered for offenders as well in these sorts of cases?
Yes, all of the therapy sessions, if it's discovered during the initial phase of therapy that one of the things that's going on is that the offender is participating in victim blaming, that is when the therapy will change to a certain degree and the counseling will change to a certain degree to address that victim blaming habit and to address those victim blaming thoughts. So yes, there are definitely resources available within the facility.
And what do you think you can do personally, or you think society can do to help improve and decrease the amount of blaming that happens?
You mean to decrease the amount of blaming that happens?
Yes.
I think that one of the things that society can do is to look at the entire picture and understand that it really doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't make any difference what a victim may have done in a situation like we're discussing now. It still doesn't give someone else the right to assault them or to sexually abuse them or anything such as that.
Right.
And one of the things that I do and that the victim assistance coordinators that we have in our facilities do is that when we talk directly with the victims and when we interact with the victims, if we sense that that they have a certain amount of, or that there is a level of blame that they're trying to put on themselves, we try to talk through that and address that. It's a little more difficult for us because we don't always get to see them face to face. A lot of our communication is over the phone or via some kind of technology, Zoom or Teams or something like that. But once we identify the fact that they are blaming themselves maybe more than they should, then we try to work with them, and we also begin to make suggestions then for other resources that may be available in their area.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't touch on?
I guess that the one thing that everyone should be aware of is the fact that victim blaming exists, and victim blaming is more serious and more difficult to deal with from the victim's perspective the younger the victim is. As an example of what I mean, if you have an individual where you have, say, a 16-year-old offender who has abused, either just assaultively abused or sexually abused a younger sibling, a sibling that's 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, many times what happens is that younger sibling will feel themselves like they are responsible because the older sibling or the older relative had been grooming them and essentially put in their mind the thought that they were responsible for what happened or had a great deal of responsibility for what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's all the time we have. But thank you again, Officer Dawn, for this time.
You are welcome, and I'm happy to discuss these subjects anytime.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.